I work as a salesperson at an agency in the city. For months, I had been saving to replace my old car with a more reliable one without completely draining my savings. I decided to look on Craigslist for those types of cars that are famous for deals that seem too good to be true. After a few weeks of searching, I found a tempting ad. A sedan in excellent condition, with only 3 years of use and a surprisingly low price. The seller's name was Derek. He responded quickly and efficiently, which reassured me, despite a nagging suspicion I tried to ignore. After some discussions about the car, I arranged to meet him on a Wednesday night in a quiet parking lot near downtown. I found the time and place odd, but Derek explained that he was only available at night because of work, and the parking lot was halfway between us. As the appointed time approached, a subtle anxiety took over me, mixed with the excitement of finally replacing my car, which looked more like a rolling wreck. I arrived at the parking lot around 9 p.m., the darkness broken only by spaced light poles casting long shadows on the asphalt. The place was deserted, except for a single car that I assumed was the one I was interested in. It was a gray sedan that, even under the weak lighting, showed more signs of wear than the photos indicated. Derek was leaning against the car, a man of average height, wearing a dark coat and a friendly smile, but his eyes seemed to hide an urgency that didn't match his calm voice. After a brief exchange of greetings, we examined the car together. Derek was quick to highlight the vehicle's qualities, avoiding lingering on details that showed wear. I agreed to take a test drive, and he insisted on coming along, claiming he wanted to show the real potential of the car. During the drive, Derek became visibly nervous, especially when I started asking about the car's documentation and history. He changed the subject, talking about how well the car still ran, but his eyes often checked the mirrors, as if he feared being followed. The atmosphere in the car grew tense, and I decided it was time to check the trunk, something Derek reluctantly agreed to after my insistence. Upon opening the trunk, I didn't expect to find much beyond a spare tire and some tools. However, to my astonishment, there was a woman's purse and several scattered documents, clearly belonging to a woman. Holding the purse, I showed it to Derek, questioning its origin. He hesitated, his voice tense and his face pale, illuminated only by the interior light of the car. Derek's expression changed instantly when he saw the purse in my hands. His demeanor, previously just nervous, turned into pure panic. He stuttered for a moment before confessing that the car actually belonged to his ex-girlfriend, who had disappeared a few months ago. He said he needed to get rid of the car quickly, and didn't think anyone would find out so soon. The revelation left me chilled, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up with a sense of imminent danger. I insisted we return to the parking lot where we had met, claiming I needed to think about the purchase. Derek agreed, but I could see the calculation in his eyes as he drove back, his hand trembling slightly on the steering wheel. When we arrived at the parking lot, Derek had barely turned off the car when he turned quickly towards me, his expression a mix of despair and anger. "You can't tell anyone about this," he told me, his voice low and tense. Before I could respond, he opened the door and stepped out of the car, starting to walk toward me threateningly. Instinctively, I got out of the car and started running, seeking shelter behind one of the few parked vehicles. Derek chased after me, his footsteps echoing on the cold asphalt of the parking lot. My breathing was heavy, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I hid behind a truck, watching as Derek passed, searching for me with a frantic look. Seizing a moment of his distraction, I ran towards the other side of the parking lot and managed to reach my cell phone in my pocket. With trembling hands and fear, I dialed the police, whispering my location and the situation. Derek was now just a few meters away, still searching for me, clearly out of his mind. As I hid, I heard Derek's footsteps approaching and then moving away, in a terrible game of cat and mouse in the dark. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the blue lights flashing in the distance, approaching quickly. The police quickly took control of the situation. They found Derek trying to escape from the other side of the parking lot. I was later informed that the car indeed belonged to Derek's ex-girlfriend, who had been reported missing and was now being investigated as a possible crime case. Derek was taken in for questioning, and the police thanked me for my call, saying it might have been crucial to unraveling the case. The night ended with me giving my statement at the police station, trying to process the surreal and frightening events that had unfolded. I'm almost sure that even he didn't know that Perce was there. I would never look at a used car ad the same way again. It was a tough time in my life, desperate to find a job that could alleviate my financial situation, which seemed increasingly unsustainable by the day. After months of fruitless searches, I found myself browsing Craigslist on a cold, quiet autumn night. My tired eyes nearly skipped over an ad that, though suspicious, caught my attention. Night shift vacancy at a logistics company. Excellent pay. No experience needed. Necessity spoke louder, and ignoring the red flags that my instinct raised, I decided to send my resume. To my surprise, the response came almost immediately. A certain Mr. Almeida invited me for an interview that very night at an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was known to be isolated and poorly frequented, but desperation pushed me there. I drove my old Ford along the nearly deserted highway, the darkness and silence of the night only interrupted by the sound of the engine. The GPS announced my arrival, and what I saw was not welcoming. A huge, dimly lit warehouse looking abandoned. The scene was straight out of a horror movie, and for a moment I hesitated. However, the urgency of my financial situation pushed me inside. Upon entering, I was greeted by a man of average height, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses even at night. He introduced himself as Mr. Almeida, but gave few details about himself or the company. As he led me through aisles of dusty shelves and randomly stacked boxes, a sense of unease grew within me. The tour of the place revealed more signs of abandonment than of logistic activity. Mr. Almeida then began to ask strangely personal questions. Do you live alone? How long could you work without people missing you? Each question increased my anxiety, and I began to feel more like I was in an interrogation scene than a true job interview. Before I could respond to another unusual question, a muffled and strange sound began to echo from the back of the warehouse. Mr. Almeida stopped abruptly, his posture tense and his gaze shifting towards the source of the noise. His sudden change in behavior only amplified the atmosphere of fear that already enveloped me. Did you hear that? He asked, trying to appear indifferent, but his voice betrayed evident nervousness. At that moment, my survival instinct shouted louder than the need for a job. Something was very wrong, and I didn't want to wait to find out what it was. I muttered an excuse, saying I needed to go to the bathroom, and started to move away, looking for any route that would take me away from there. My heart pounding erratically, I began to move quickly through the dark maze of corridors, until the sound of hurried footsteps behind me confirmed my worst fears. I was being followed. I looked back and saw, to my horror, not just Mr. Almeida, but a second shadowy figure moving towards me. The face was hidden in the shadows, and their presence only increased the tension that cut through the air. I ran like I had never run before, dodging between boxes and equipment. Reaching my car, I locked the doors and sped away, leaving behind the warehouse and the night that almost became my last. As soon as I felt at a safe distance, I stopped at a police station and reported everything that had occurred. The police acted promptly, but upon returning to the location, they discovered that the warehouse had been emptied, as if no one had been there for years. I know it was completely reckless to enter that place alone, but in times of financial distress, we put ourselves in bad situations out of desperation. Since I moved to the big city in search of professional opportunities, the high cost of living made me look for more affordable housing options. Being a 24-year-old graphic designer, balancing comfort and price was essential. That's how, on a rainy afternoon while browsing Craigslist, I came across an ad that seemed perfect. A room in a well-located apartment with a surprisingly low price. Alex, the person who advertised the room, promptly responded to my email, and we scheduled a visit for the next day. The apartment was in a charming old building with stone details and large windows. Inside, everything was clean and well decorated, which gave me even more confidence to accept the offer to move in immediately. Alex, who appeared to be about 30 years old, proved extremely sociable and helpful in the first few days. She worked in technology, which allowed for many interesting conversations during shared dinners. Everything seemed perfect until a few weeks later, I noticed a drastic change in Alex's behavior. She began to avoid eye contact, locked herself in her room for hours, and her friendly aura disappeared, leaving a heavy atmosphere in the air. As days passed, Alex's change became more worrisome. Shared meals ceased, and conversations were replaced by an uncomfortable silence that extended through the apartment's corridors. On one particularly restless night, driven by a growing sense that something was wrong, I decided to look for something to calm me down. That's when, while adjusting a book on the living room shelf, I noticed something peculiar. A small metallic object embedded in the wood, almost imperceptible. It was a camera. My heart raced. With trembling hands, I began to search more and found other hidden cameras. In the plant pot, in the pictures on the wall, and, to my absolute horror, inside my own room. The discovery made me feel a mix of anger and dread. The next day, I confronted Alex. Her reaction was frightening. Not only did she confirm that the cameras were hers, but she also became aggressive. "You shouldn't have found this," she hissed, with a clear threat in her voice. "If you tell anyone, you will regret it." That night, I hardly slept. Fear mixed with outrage. By morning, Alex had disappeared. Not just physically, but also digitally. Her phone was off, her social media had been deleted, and it seemed like she had never existed. After Alex disappeared, I decided not to wait any longer and called the police. When the officers arrived and I explained the situation, they initiated an investigation that soon revealed even deeper layers of deceit. The person I knew as Alex was actually using a false identity, and the apartment was rented under a completely different name. The reality that I had shared my home with a complete stranger haunted me. During the investigation, it was discovered that Alex was involved in illegal activities in other cities, including espionage and suspicions of being linked to mysterious disappearances. The house where I lived had been a web of surveillance for reasons that even the police couldn't fully unravel. Months later, I still feel the effects of that horrible experience. Every security camera on the street makes me pause. Every click or strange sound in my new apartment makes me shudder. Paranoia has become a constant companion, and although life has continued, the shadow of those days remains with me.